The map that we are looking at here is of the 10 different Native American regions that were created by cultural anthropologist Alfred Kroeber. But today we are actually just going to focus on some of the general information of the Native American region, which we are going to refer to as the Southeast region. The Southeast, as I'm going to write up here, either goes by the Southeast region or also goes by the Southeastern Woodlands. Both names are acceptable, but I usually just refer to this region as the Southeast. The Southeast region starts where our current Virginia is and moves south all the way down through Florida and then west to the Mississippi River. And as you can see here, the map is labeled by the light green color. Now, this region is actually very interesting because we have many different areas which people could live. The Appalachian Mountain Range actually ends, or you could say starts, in the southeastern region and actually moves all the way up into Canada. In this area, we have people living in valleys, near rivers, near coastlines, and actually near some swamps. Generally, the climate was pretty mild, and we had some tropical winds blowing through occasionally. Now, people generally lived near water sources, and so you would see more people settling near rivers and lakes, and also near the ocean, but the ocean actually doesn't have clean drinking water. People actually were pretty much nomadic prior to 500 CE. After 500 CE, nations started to create cultural areas in towns and villages. And what they would do here is, rather than searching for food, they would actually grow it. And they actually started to create some very sophisticated agricultural growing systems. So the most popular is the maize or the corn. And then other popular things to grow would be bean and squash. Now, these three food items actually are referred to as the Three Sisters. So if you come across that in your reading, you know it's referring to corn, bean, and squash. Now, other things that were grown would be melon, sunflower, nuts, fruits, and they would often find edible roots, stalks, and leaves. But if you lived near the ocean, and if you lived near a major water source, you ate a lot of fish and seafood. People would catch shellfish with netting. They would set up traps. They would use spears and hook and lines to find fish, to hunt fish. But if you lived far away from water, you actually relied on larger game and some small game animals, such as bear, deer, turkey, and squirrel. And one of the most commonly used tools to hunt animals was actually bow and arrows. But the smaller game was actually killed by poisoning blow darts, and the hunters would actually blow the blow darts, killing the animals that way. While people were starting to develop these towns, their housing was actually more permanent rather than something that would be easy to move. And this structure of housing is actually called water and daub. And what this would mean would be that they would put permanent poles in the ground, and then they would weave river cane, wood, vines into the frame, and then coat that with a cover of plaster. Now, roofing would either be thatched grass, or they would make shingles out of bark. So as these nations were developing these villages, they started to become more permanent and more prominent. So here I'm just going to clear a little space so I can write some more information for you. Now, there are probably around 30 different nations that resided in the southeastern region around 1500 CE. But I'm just going to write a few on this map, mainly because I just don't have that much space. In the Florida region, we have our Seminole Nation. And further north, we have our Cherokee. And below them, we have the Muskogee Creek. So in your notes, make sure you're writing Muskogee Creek. And the Chickasaw. And the Choctaw Nation. Now, these 5 nations that I've put here in the southeastern region are referred to as the 5 civilized tribes. Obviously, that was a name that was given to these 5 nations. But when you're reading your notes on the Trail of Tears, it usually refers to these 5 civilized tribes as the ones who were forcefully removed from their homelands and were forced to move to Indian Territory, which at the time was land that was west of the Mississippi, but now refers to the land of our current state, Oklahoma. Now, there are actually many different language groups in the southeastern region, but since I only listed the 5 civilized tribes, I'm going to just focus on 2 different language groups. And the Muskogean language family was the language family that was actually spoken by the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Muskogee Creek, and the Seminole. Other language families that I'm not going to write here, but were also spoken in this region, were the Siouan language and the Caddoan language families. The Cherokee Nation spoke a language that was derived from the Iroquoian language family. And when we get to the northeast region, you will notice that this language is widespread. Now, nations that lived near water often traveled by canoe, or if they had to travel long distance on land, they would do it by foot. Later on, after European contact, when horses were brought over, horses were a very popular source of transportation. So that's a general overview of the Southeast region, and in the videos to come, we'll talk more about the music and the instruments of the nations that lived in the Southeast or the Southeastern Woodlands region.